Every great anime needs a supreme evil organization for the hero to defeat by the end of the story, and in One Piece, that big bad guy is the entire world government and marine system. Which, let me tell you, this system is so massive and complex with tons of important characters, good, neutral, and evil, that it's sometimes incredibly difficult to even know if they're gonna be the final boss of the series or just a group that we actually might be rooting for at the end. And so if all of this feels a little bit confusing for you as well, I'm going to explain in detail how this entire organization actually works, and it all begins with the surprising fact that the Marines as a whole are actually not all that bad. Because one thing to keep in mind about this group is that it is absolutely enormous. I think people really don't understand this, and while we don't have official numbers, there are most likely hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Marines who work hard to keep the peace around an entire planet. Because despite all of the legendary clashes that we see in the main story and of course the Grand Line, the Marines' primary role is actually to protect the 170 island kingdoms that are actually officially part of the world government. And all of these kingdoms have to pay a tax called the Heavenly Tribute to the world nobles to keep the protections from the world government and the Marines, plus they kind of get to vote on some things which we will discuss more about later on. But the Marines are actually incredibly necessary and important for just your average Joe of the One Piece world, because if you live on some random island in the ocean, you probably don't have that many strong fighters to protect yourself, so actually having the Marines around to fight off evil pirates is 100% a good thing overall. Which actually does make it incredibly ironic that we mostly get to see the Marines as bad guys because our main character Luffy fights against them, and mostly also the most corrupt ones. However, we do have to keep in mind that Luffy is a pirate, and it's the Marines' job to actually protect the world from pirates. I mean, really, just think about it for a minute. Almost everywhere Luffy goes, he gets into gigantic fights that leave a huge mess for the island to clean up afterwards that we just never get to see. And so if you're just a regular citizen or Marine and you don't know the true reasons why Luffy was fighting there, you'd probably just think he was one of the most evil guys in the world as well. So yeah, that's the basic job of the Marines: protect people from pirates. And this is true basically everywhere in the world except for the Grand Line, where many islands are mostly ruled by pirates, which again we'll discuss more a little bit later on. But how does the system actually work? Well, to properly explain this, we have to work our way up through the different Marine ranks. So imagine you are a good-hearted person who just really, from the bottom of your heart, wants to help make the world a better and safer place, kind of like Kobe right here. And so to sign up, you probably have to go to your local Marine base, which are scattered literally all across all of the oceans of the world. And unless you're already a super well-known or very powerful individual, you will more than likely be starting out at the very bottom rank as a chore boy, which means that you'll probably be spending a fairly good amount of time on a random Marine base or ship, just really helping out with the basic chores, not even any fighting. But then, after some time, if you do show some fighting capabilities, you might be promoted to Seaman Recruit, which means that you're now a common soldier in the Marines. And so now, instead of wiping decks or carrying stuff around, you are now actually thrown onto the front lines of big battles to defend the people in your territory, and let's really just hope you don't get one-shot by literally anyone strong out there. I guess what you'd kind of call general fodder. Now, this is each Marine's basic job all the way up to the Seaman Apprentice rank, Seaman First Class, and even into the different Paddy and Warrant Officer ranks. But as you move more and more up, you'll probably get more and more responsibilities and men you actually command, such as communicating orders to lower ranked soldiers, and hopefully there are some benefits as well here. In fact, the very first time that we actually meet this black-haired swordswoman, who surprisingly looks quite a lot like Zoro's childhood friend Kuina, she is a Master Chief Petty Officer who works directly under a Marine Captain, which makes her second in command of the entire Marine base in Loketown, which is quite impressive. And so just like Tashigi here, which is her name, you can have a ton of responsibility even before you ever become a captain. At least that's in the 4 Blue Seas, where the Marines are typically a little bit lower ranked until they're promoted to the actual Grand Line. Although, who knows, maybe it's actually a good thing to stay around here, because as we'll see in just a moment, the higher you rise in rank, the more corrupt the organization becomes. But let's now jump into the actual commissioned officers, starting off with ensign officer rank. Now, we're going to stick with Tashigi for this rank because when we saw her back during the post-Enies Lobby arc, she had recently actually been promoted to just this rank, which, to be fair, I'm not sure how much authority this gave her, but I'd assume that she can at least give orders to a larger group of Marines, and they likely have a certain area of the sea to patrol as well. Plus, on top of this, she is in the Grand Line now, so the average pirate she will fight is way stronger than on base level all around the world. And that's clearly what we see her doing most of the time, because it looks like she and her allies just finished protecting an island from a group of pirates. But that still doesn't mean that at this rank she has much freedom to make her own choices in the Marine, so if you want to actually have some level of independence and freedom to choose stuff, how high do you actually need to go in this organization? Well, let's skip ahead to the rank of captain and see how great having some independence actually turns out to be, because it is at this exact rank that many captains actually get to control their very own Marine base, which can be an absolute disaster for people living around the base. For example, the very first captain that we meet in the story is this axe-handed captain of the 153rd Marine branch, but this dude was literally evil. He would heavily tax the villagers, was very corrupt, execute people for talking back to his son, and build giant statues of himself just to satisfy his pride. And if you're thinking that that's the only random example of a corrupt captain in One Piece, well, there's also this cat-faced captain who was supposed to help free Nami's village from the evil fisherman crew, but instead just accepted a major bribe and stole all of Nami's hard-earned money instead. So yeah, wow, these guys are just plain awful, which might make you wonder how they even got their ranks in the first place. Well, as we'll see later on, the only thing that really matters to Marines is your fighting strength apparently, so as long as you can prove yourself to some degree in combat, you will probably keep rising through the Marine ranks, which is a really stupidly messed up system if we're being honest. But captains can also be out on patrol instead of having their own base, and in the Grand Line, the rank of captain is basically the lowest ranked Marine who can put up a decent fight against a somewhat important pirates, because really anyone below captain basically gets completely washed at a certain level by every pirate. Which does now bring us to commodores, which is the rank just below the all-important admiral type ranks. Now, normally these Marines here are just higher ranking captains who have similar duties, but there are a few notable commodores who deal with special matters that are way too important for lower ranked Marines. For example, this commodore here is in charge of assigning bounties to pirates all across the world. However, they still lack the freedom of higher ranking Marines, as we saw when this chain-smoking Marine was a commodore and he complained that he still needed a higher rank to actually accomplish his goal of chasing the Straw Hats into the New Worlds. But now we're actually getting to a whole new tier of Marines with the rank of Rear Admiral. Now at this rank, we're well past your common Marines because these characters are fighters who can be trusted to hold their own against strong pirates. For example, this ruthless Lady Marine is now a Rear Admiral, as is this clay-using Marine that we actually just recently met in the manga, who has command of one of the most important Marine bases that is located right next to many of the Yonko territories in the New Worlds. However, even these strong Rear Admirals are nothing compared to this next rank, which is of course that of Vice Admiral. Not only is this the rank with the most currently known members in the story, but they're essentially the group of Marines trusted with special missions, such as when this guy was sent to bring the Pirate Empress to Marineford, and they were the largest group of strong Marines during the war at Marineford as well. Also, Vice Admirals are in charge of massive fleets of Marine battleships, which we see put to devastating effect when 5 Vice Admirals are sent on a Buster Call mission on Enies Lobby. On top of that, Vice Admirals are also the first rank to actually have a very decent degree of flexibility and freedom. For example, when this smoking dude finally achieves this rank, he can finally fulfill his wish of chasing after the Straw Hats freely. Then of course we have the hero of the Marine, Luffy's grandfather Garp, who basically does whatever he wants as a Vice Admiral, although we do see him following some orders from time to time occasionally, such as when he escorted the Fishman royalty to the meeting of the world rulers. And interestingly, Vice Admirals are confirmed to be quite excellent fighters. Many of them have devil fruit, but it is also officially confirmed that all of them know at least some form of haki as well. But with all of that being said, usually there are literal galaxies of differences between the Vice admirals, and the next rank, which is of course the admiral tier, which you can take a shortcut to by subscribing to the channel for more One Piece content just like this. And seriously though, the admirals are commonly referred to as the greatest power in the Marines, and for a very good reason. To be promoted to the rank of an admiral means that you are one of the literal strongest fighters in the entire world. In fact, there are only ever 3 of these positions at one time, and we've seen throughout the story that these Marines are just devastatingly powerful in fight and possess some of the most broken devil fruits as well. For example, admirals like the light fruit user Kizaru have nearly killed Luffy multiple times, and even the former Admiral Aokiji easily defeated Luffy as well. So these dudes are really not people you should mess around with. In fact, they're really more monsters than people at this point. They do have a ton of responsibility as well though, as they're essentially the bodyguards of the world nobles, who we'll talk about more in just a moment. And whenever there is a Yonko level threat, the admirals are the ones who are actually sent in to deal with that problem. Each admiral also has their very own personal style of justice, which influences the actions that they take. For example, Aokiji's justice is lazy justice, which means that he will sometimes follow orders and other times kind of do what he thinks is best. For example, we kind of saw this when he allowed Robin to escape after the destruction of her home island, and even later on after she escaped with the Straw Hats. Also, the admirals all kind of follow that color animal theme, so you have the yellow monkey, Kizaru, red dog, blue pheasant, and so on and so forth. However, there is one even higher rank in the Marines than the admirals, and that is the position of Fleet Admiral, which, if I'm being completely honest, I personally don't think that I would want to have this job at all, because even the super aggressive kind of combat loving magma fruit using Akainu went from being this one-man army kind of thing as an admiral to being just a pencil pushing administrator ever since he got his promotion to Fleet Admiral. Although he does get to set the actual main philosophy of the Marines, which in this case means that the Marines now follow Akainu's absolute justice. And this change in philosophy compared to the previous Fleet Admiral Sengoku means that now the entire Marine organization is a lot more cutthroat and willing to do whatever it takes to just straight out kill pirates, even if it requires some truly evil things along the way. And altogether, this is actually the main structure of the Marines, but you might be surprised to know that they are just one single pillar of what makes up the entire world government military forces. And that's because there are actually 2 other super important branches of the military that affect the world in different ways. And the first of these are the legendary 𝙻𝚎𝚐𝚐 agencies, whose main job involves investigation, spying, and assassinations. Now currently there are 6 known 𝙻𝚎𝚐 groups. The most known of these is of course CP9, who were the Straw Hats' main enemies during the Water 7 and Enies Lobby arcs, and this particular group specialized in assassinations, but they were also secret agents who spent years working undercover to find the blueprints to the ancient weapon Pluton on Water 7. But that's not even the strongest group though, because after the time skip we were introduced to ZP9, which, if I'm being honest, is essentially made up of mostly the old CP9 agents. And what's special about this group is that they work directly for the world nobles, which, if you know anything about those scumbags, then you should know that they are up to no good. In fact, we've even seen some of the single shadiest dealings of the world government directly involving CP0. For example, when they were negotiating with the evil shogun of Wano and a literal Yonko Kaido to buy weapons from them, and when they were buying literal orphans from this old lady to train them to become government agents as well. And so clearly this branch of the world government has a lot more to do with the corruption and evil nature of the entire system than the first group that we've talked about before. But that's not even the worst part though, because the other main pillar of the world government forces is the entire warlord system. And let me tell you that this system was just completely messed up right from the start. Now, if you don't know, the way that this works is that the world government invited certain pirates to work with them. And so once a pirate becomes a warlord, they basically get to do whatever they want without any consequences, being free from the Marines. For example, the warlords Crocodile and Doflamingo essentially decided to take over entire kingdoms, but the Marines were restricted from doing anything to stop them. However, in exchange for this level of freedom, the warlords then must fight for the world government whenever they're being called upon. And we really only ever saw this happen once in the story during the war at Marineford, where the warlords actually actually had to help the Marines fight against the Emperor Whitebeard. And of course, this is the perfect time to also mention that the Marines, the Warlords, and the Yonko make up what is the so-called three-power system of the One Piece world. And the idea here is that the combined strength of the Marines and the Warlords kind of helps balance out the immense power of the Emperors. And with this balance, the strongest pirates usually end up staying within their territories in the Grand Line, which keeps the world from being thrown completely into chaos, which worked out somewhat well, I'd say, until the Warlord system was just completely thrown in the garbage because of the awful things that some of the Warlords had done. But that system was then quickly replaced by the new Special Science Group, which is made up of some of the most insane technology the world has ever seen. And that's because the genius scientist of the world government has invented an entire army of super strong cyborgs who can shoot laser beams, plus there are now these ultra powerful clones that have devil fruit powers and basically cannot be destroyed. And so with all of this incredibly destructive technology, the world government is a bigger threat now than ever before. Oh, and actually there's one other special group within the Marines that we haven't talked about yet. This group is called SWORD, and they are Marines who have officially given up their Marine status, but who still work towards the overall good of the Marine organization. Really, the only difference is that they are not restricted by Marine orders or orders from higher up, but that unfortunately also means that a SWORD member will not be saved by the Marines if they ever get into trouble. That was, by the way, perfectly shown by this SWORD member who went undercover as a pirate, joined an Emperor's crew, but then turned against Kaido when the Straw Hats came to defeat the Emperor during the Wano arc. And every single group that I just mentioned is directly under the control of this guy here, who you might have never seen before, who is actually the commander-in-chief of the world government. Which does mean that he can basically give orders to anyone who works for the government, Marines, special agents, anything. But his main role is actually to act as a kind of go-between for the military forces and the actual world nobles. And I mean, can you even imagine the insane amount of just ridiculous requests that this man must be getting from the world nobles? Because if the entire group of world nobles are just half as crazy as the ones we've already met, then they have got to be the most selfish, idiotic, spoiled group of individuals on the entire planet. Which you might be wondering, how is it even possible that these people came to be in charge of the world in the first place? Well, the answer is that these people are the descendants of the original 20 kingdoms who ended up founding the world government organization over 800 years ago after the so-called Void Century. And since that time, the world nobles have lived up on the top of the Red Line, where they hold absolute power over the world. And here we get into really dark territory, because this includes the freedom to keep slaves, kidnap, murder, and waste stupid amounts of money on ridiculous things with literally zero consequences. They can also give any order to the Marines and 𝙻𝚎𝚐𝚐, plus they are protected everywhere they go. Nonetheless, surprisingly, we found out that they do seem to actually have some of their own laws that they must obey and follow as well, and we only know that because recently in the manga we were introduced to a brand new group of government soldiers called the Holy Knights of God. And this specific group seems to be made up of super powerful world nobles who have the power to enforce justice even among themselves, which we can clearly see when they even kill and crucify one of their own for a certain crime. Which honestly, it seemed impossible that something like this could happen to the untouchable figures, but these Holy Knights are not even the highest ranking world nobles out there. And that's because the main group of nobles that we always see making big decisions for the entire world are these 5 old men right here. These are the so-called Gorosei, often translated as the 5 elder stars, though as we now know, it's more likely that it's actually the 5 elder planets. And of course, this is where the corruption of the world government truly starts running deep, because this group uses all the military forces of the world government to protect their deepest and darkest secrets, which we'll be talking about in just a moment. First though, we do have to ask, just who are these 5 old men? Well, for one, we do know that they are actual world nobles, although unlike the rest, they don't wear these ridiculous spacesuits and helmets. Plus, we only quite recently learned their names and their official government duties in the manga, and we also don't know how they were chosen to be part of the Gorosei in the first place. But the most important question that is still unanswered wondered is if they have actually been alive ever since the world government was formed 800 years ago. And that's because, I mean, the way they talk sometimes really makes it seem like they've been alive for a long time, kind of as immortal gods who just view the races and wars of the world as playthings. But then again, if they actually are immortal, then surely someone would have noticed if these dudes ever age, since they are sometimes seen meeting with other people. However, that's not even the most mysterious part about them, because as we've been shown throughout the entire story, the Gorosei will do anything to protect the secrets of the Void Century. Now, if you don't know, this is a time period that occurred between 9 and 800 years ago, but all history of it has been literally erased from the entire world. That means there is no mention of anything during this time. However, there is one big exception to this, and that is these unbreakable stone writings called poneglyphs, which actually record the true history of the Void Century. Plus, they do point towards the direction of Laugh Tale, the final island, which does contain the One Piece treasure. So yeah, these things are a serious problem for the Gorosei, which makes it a little bit odd that after 800 years, they still haven't managed to go around and collect all of these stones. But whatever the true history actually is, it will probably not be as shocking as the ultimate power of the world government. By the way, a major spoiler warning here if you aren't quite caught up to the latest start of the Wano arc, but in chapter 906 of the manga, it was revealed that there is actually a secret ruler of the world government named Imu, who can make even the Gorosei, the highest of the highest, bow down and listen to their orders. So yeah, you heard that right. Seriously, there is a mysterious person who literally has all the power. If Imu wants a nearby kingdom literally wiped off the map, they do it. If Imu wants a certain princess of a kingdom to be kidnapped, it is done. They literally have control over everything and everyone. And so, funnily enough, what is supposed to be a government where 170 kingdoms from all across the world come together every 4 years to vote on important issues is in truth controlled by the world nobles, who again are just puppets for this mysterious figure who we are still waiting to learn a lot more about. You can really kind of think about it like a bad apple, where on the outside it looks very pretty delicious and shiny, just like most of the Marines are actual good people, but once you get to the inside of the apple, it turns out it is completely rotten to the core, literally. But wait, even though we've now reached the literal top of the world government structure, there are still some other really important details that we need to mention. The first is that the government also controls the justice system, which does include the Justice Island of Enies Lobby, where criminals are tried in court, which is completely corrupt, by the way, before being then sent to the underwater prison Impel Down. And as you can see during the Impel Down arc, this is where the worst pirates and criminals are sent to be tortured, literally until they die. Nice. Also, I did already mention the founding of the world government in passing, but it's worth spending a little bit more time on because this history is absolutely going to play a major role in the final saga of the story. That's because from the little that we already know, there was a major war way back during the Void Century. And during that war, the original 20 kingdoms of the world government fought against an unknown group that was most likely led by the legendary figure Joy Boy, which, if you've been on the internet at all recently, you probably already know that Luffy has now inherited the title of Joy Boy, so we simply must learn more about this time period and how the world government actually gained their powers. Because I mean, if they've spent so much time and effort keeping the information hidden, it must be something incredibly dark that they absolutely don't want the world to know. Plus, what's maybe even crazier is that we also recently learned that the One Piece world used to be way more technologically advanced than it is right now. In fact, the world had giant robots, lasers, cloning technology, possibly space travel, and way more awesome stuff that the world is only now starting to relearn how to do. And so really, there must be some really big reason why the world government wanted to send the world back to basically the Stone Age when they began their rule 800 years ago. And on top of that, there of course also is the secrets of the devil fruits, which are probably also somehow tied to this time period, so I simply cannot wait for all these secrets to be revealed to the world. But we of course cannot mention the world government and Marines without also bringing up the main groups who oppose them. There are of course pirates like Luffy and the Yonko who have major influence throughout the world, but honestly, these groups aren't seriously trying to take each other out. They only sometimes come into major conflicts like during Marineford. And so much more importantly, there is the revolutionary army led by Luffy's father, Dragon, citizen whose sole mission is to take down the corrupt world nobles. Which, the specific wording of this is actually important because they don't actually want to destroy the Marines, just the evil rulers who sit at the top of it all. And in fact, only quite recently have they actually gone head to head against the world government in a fight and declared war, because for most of the story, the Revolutionary Army has been focused on convincing kingdoms all around the globe to leave the government and join their revolution. Which is exactly the reason why this kingdom from earlier got completely wiped off the map. And with this weapon capable of destroying islands in the world government's hands, it's going to take a ton of firepower to eventually actually defeat them. But luckily, the One Piece world has one of the most impressive power systems in all of anime, with a huge variety of powers like Haki, Devil Fruit, Science, and even much more. So if you want a complete breakdown of the incredible and complex power system of One Piece, you can watch the entire breakdown right here. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.